I came home early one night and discovered a secret between my wife and my father. They asked me to stay silent for the sake of family, but telling the truth changed everything. Before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. I walked in on my wife and my father together in our bedroom. She looked at me and said she loved both of us. I couldn't even speak. I spat in their direction, grabbed my things, and walked out. Whatever consequences were coming, I hoped they were prepared. Earlier that day, our office systems had crashed, and management announced we'd be shut down for the rest of the afternoon. I left work in an unusually good mood. I stopped by our favorite Thai place and picked up lunch, thinking I'd surprise Emily. 3 years into our marriage, I truly believed we were doing okay. It wasn't perfect, but I never suspected anything this broken. That belief started cracking the moment I turned onto our street. My father Richard's car was parked a short distance away, not directly outside the house. I recognized it instantly. He had it freshly detailed not long ago and treated it like a museum piece. The engine was cold. At first I assumed he had stopped by briefly and left. But when I went inside, the house felt wrong, too quiet. The television was on but barely audible. Emily wasn't in the living room. On the coffee table sat 3 mugs, each still holding a bit of coffee. I didn't call her name. I'm not sure why. Something inside me already knew. As I climbed the stairs, I heard muffled voices coming from our bedroom. One was hers. The other was unmistakably his. I froze in the hallway, trying to rationalize it. Maybe they were talking. Maybe it was something serious. Maybe I was overreacting. I wasn't. When I opened the door, they weren't frantic or scrambling. They weren't having sex, but it was intimate in a way that felt even worse. They sat close on the bed, hands clasped, foreheads resting together, like 2 people sharing a private moment. Neither looked surprised to see me. Emily looked up first. There was no panic in her expression, just an unsettling calm. Richard followed, staring at me as though I had interrupted an inconvenience rather than uncovered a betrayal. No one rushed to explain. Richard eventually stood and said we needed to talk. I couldn't move, but somehow my body followed them into the dining room. I was still holding the bag of food like it was glued to my hand. Emily started talking. She said things weren't what they appeared, but admitted I deserved honesty. She claimed she and Richard had known each other long before I met her. They had been close, too close, and their past was complicated. She said it never truly ended. I asked the question out loud. Were they having an affair? My voice cracked as I said it. Richard answered instead of her. He said it was deeper than that their emotional connection never faded, that they had come to realize they were still in love. It felt unreal, like watching a poorly written movie. I kept waiting for someone to laugh and tell me this was some cruel experiment. Emily said they never meant to hurt me. Somehow that made it worse. They spoke gently, sincerely, as if betrayal could be softened by tone. Richard explained that we were all adults and that there was a way to handle this rationally. It didn't have to turn ugly. When I asked what he meant, he suggested maintaining the marriage legally while living separate personal lives. No messy divorce, no public drama. Everyone stays calm. He framed it like a practical arrangement. I could date again. Emily could eventually move out. We'd ease into separation quietly without scandal. He called it a win for everyone. I asked if they were out of their minds. Emily reached for my hand and said she still loved me, just differently now. She said I mattered too much to lose entirely. She even suggested redefining our relationship, as if love wasn't something sacred but adjustable. I stood up and walked out without grabbing my keys. I wandered for hours before ending up in a park near my office. I sat on a bench trying to understand how my life had imploded so completely. How long had this been happening? Had it ever stopped? Had I ever truly been more than a placeholder? I didn't go back home. I stayed with my friend Jake and told him everything. At first he thought I was joking. Then he asked what I planned to do. I had no answer. Sleep didn't come for days. In the silence, everything started to make sense. Emily's reactions to Richard, the way she lit up around him, family jokes about how similar they were. How Richard always seemed available to help. How Emily never minded him staying late. By the 4th night, something hardened inside me. Whatever peaceful fantasy they thought they could maintain was over. I contacted a lawyer. For 10 days, I ignored every call and message. I stayed at Jake's place. He didn't push me to talk. Most days, I just sat on his porch staring at the yard, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. I went to work on autopilot. On the 12th day, I finally responded. I said I didn't want a conversation. I just needed to pick up some belongings. That message triggered panic. My phone exploded with texts. Emily sent a long one saying she was hurt I wouldn't hear her out. She insisted their plan was the most compassionate solution. Compassionate. The word echoed in my head for hours. When I returned to the house, Jake came with me. I didn't trust myself there alone. The house looked staged, spotless. Emily had baked cookies like this was a casual visit. Richard lounged in his chair like he was hosting dinner. They tried to talk again. Richard said he never expected things to spiral like this, that it was hard for him too, that he hoped I'd consider their proposal. Jake laughed out loud. I packed a small bag, grabbed documents, and ignored Emily as she followed me, explaining. She admitted it was bad but said emotions weren't logical. She said she still cared. I told her caring would have meant honesty. She cried quietly. I felt nothing. Before leaving, I told them they deserved each other, but not me. Later, at a pub, I said out loud that I was filing for divorce. Jake agreed. When he asked about telling the family, it hit harder than I expected. I wasn't ready. More messages came that night, talk of forgiveness, maturity, second chances. That's when I realized they didn't just want my consent. They expected my silence. I sent one sentence back, "You made your choice, I'm making mine." I stopped replying after that, but I kept everything documented. Eventually, the truth had to come out. At a family gathering, I saw them sitting together like nothing happened. I couldn't let them rewrite the story. I stood up and told everyone exactly what they'd done. The room went silent. Richard tried to justify it. I shut him down. Emily called it complicated. I walked out. Messages followed, some supportive, some silent. Richard accused me of embarrassing the family. Emily said she hoped I'd understand someday. I didn't respond. I instructed my lawyer to proceed. That weekend, I drove to the coast and walked until sunset, realizing something important. Silence isn't peace. Truth is. And if telling it makes me the villain in their story, so be it. They were never heroes to begin with. For days after that family dinner, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. A full week of notifications, some short messages filled with shock, others awkward attempts at sympathy. A handful came from distant relatives I barely remembered, people I hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly eager to offer comfort or solidarity. Most of the family, though, stayed completely silent. And those who did speak didn't all come with kindness. One of Richard's brothers, my uncle, was especially vocal. He sent message after message telling me I should have kept everything private. According to him, every family had secrets, and airing personal issues at a gathering was immature and unnecessary. He said I forced his hand, but he also insisted he wasn't choosing sides. I didn't reply. If neutrality made him feel safer, he was welcome to it. I wasn't asking anyone to stand behind me. I simply refused to accept the idea that being mature meant swallowing betrayal quietly. The call that hurt the most came from my mother. One of my cousins had told her. She called me, her voice calm but tired. She said she wasn't surprised, only disappointed that she heard it from someone else instead of me. She admitted she had spent years convincing herself she was the problem during her marriage to Richard, living with doubt and confusion long after their divorce. She didn't ask for details. She just told me to protect myself and reminded me that she loved me. I didn't realize until later how much that conversation steadied me. While I was trying to stay grounded, Richard and Emily were busy constructing whatever version of reality suited them best. They posted a smiling photo together at a wholesome outdoor family event. The caption talked about forgiveness, growth, and new beginnings. It made my stomach turn. It felt like watching someone decorate a house built on graves. I knew what they were doing, reshaping the narrative so they looked resilient, united, healed. I didn't comment. I didn't engage. But I also wasn't going to let the truth be rewritten unchecked. When Emily received the divorce papers, she called. I didn't answer. Then she texted, suggesting we pause the process until emotions cooled down, maybe revisit things later. I forwarded everything to my lawyer and told him to continue. She had lived beside me for months pretending to be someone she wasn't, calling me her husband while secretly messaging my father, laughing with me, kissing me, sharing a bed. That kind of betrayal doesn't fade, it scars. She kept reaching out. Long messages explaining how she'd been confused, how she followed her heart, how she never meant to hurt me. She hoped I'd forgive her someday, even if it took time. That's when I understood how deeply she failed to grasp the damage she caused. To her, it was a tragic love triangle, an unfortunate emotional collision shaped by timing and feelings. She couldn't see the wreckage. The manipulation, the imbalance of power, the pressure to make me accept their fantasy so they wouldn't have to sit with guilt. This wasn't romance. It was betrayal wrapped in entitlement. Richard tried again too, a voicemail this time. He said he still wanted a way forward, that no matter what happened, we were blood. That he wouldn't let this tear us apart permanently. I didn't finish listening. This was never about revenge. I didn't want to destroy their lives or parade their mistakes for entertainment. I just wanted to stop pretending, stop sitting across from people who betrayed me and acting grateful for their honesty. I wanted my place in the family without performing forgiveness. Still, I kept waiting for guilt to arrive. I thought I'd regret speaking publicly, thought I'd feel shame for causing fallout, but guilt never came. Instead, peace did. I'd wake up and realize I no longer had to analyze the way Emily held her phone. I didn't have to wonder why Richard inserted himself into my marriage. I didn't have to carry the impossible weight of pleasing everyone while breaking myself in half. One afternoon, I met Jake outside a coffee shop. He asked how I truly was, not casually but sincerely. I told him the truth. Some days were bleak, quiet, lonely. But each day felt a little more like it belonged to me again. He smiled and said that sounded like healing. I think he was right. Healing isn't elegant. Sometimes it means blocking numbers. Sometimes it means yelling into pillows or deleting years of photos. Sometimes it means letting people label you bitter so you can finally be free. I thought the worst had passed. I was renting a place across from Jake while his neighbor was away. It worked out well, temporary quiet. One evening after work, I came home and found a letter taped to my door. Not mailed, not slipped underneath, taped. It was from Richard. He wrote that he didn't expect immediate forgiveness but hoped we could talk like adults. He said he and Emily were considering a future together and wanted my blessing. He claimed they couldn't fully move forward knowing I was still hurting, that the family needed peace. The arrogance made my skin crawl. Even now, he saw himself as the mediator. The reasonable one, still framing everything as a misunderstanding that just needed calm conversation. That's when it clicked. He didn't feel remorse. He felt inconvenienced. He wasn't sorry for what he'd done. He was annoyed that I hadn't gotten over it yet. I threw the letter away, but it stayed in my head. What kind of man carries on with his son's wife before the wedding, during the marriage, and after the separation, then asks for approval like it's a ceremony, not devastation? Anger crept back in, slowly, deliberately. I had been so focused on cutting ties that I hadn't fully processed how twisted the entire situation was. The gaslighting, the audacity, the expectation that I should cooperate for family harmony. They never wanted healing, they wanted silence. A week later, my cousin Sarah reached out. She'd seen Richard and his new girlfriend at a restaurant, laughing, holding hands, acting newly in love. Richard introduced her by saying they were grateful everything had worked out. Worked out. I stared at those words until my vision blurred. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to write exposés or start online battles, but I also wasn't going to let the story become theirs alone. I gathered everything, messages, dates, screenshots, that letter. I'd retrieved it from the trash earlier. I wasn't planning destruction, I was building proof. So that if anyone ever asked again, "Are you sure it happened like that?" I could answer confidently, "Yes, and here's why." Around then, an old friend reached out for coffee, someone I hadn't heard from since the wedding. I hesitated but agreed. I just wanted something normal. I gave him the short version. He listened quietly. Then he said something that stuck with me. He told me that on my wedding day, he'd noticed something off. He saw the way Richard looked at Emily. Not protective, not proud. Possessive, it unsettled him. But what do you say at a wedding? You convince yourself you imagined it. I didn't know whether to feel validated or nauseous. Before we parted, he told me I wasn't alone. That if I ever needed a place, a distraction, or company, he was there. I appreciated it more than I could express. That night, everything crashed down at once. Betrayal doesn't break you immediately. It sneaks up. You think you'll rise above it. Be graceful, be strong. But sometimes strength feels like standing alone while everyone else pretends nothing happened. I lay awake replaying memories I couldn't erase. Dinners, birthdays, quiet evenings, all the moments that now felt contaminated. And the worst part? I'd protected everyone else's comfort for so long that I'd forgotten to protect my own peace. That ended the next morning. I wrote a letter, not public, just to close family and trusted friends. I told the truth. Plain, unembellished. I said I wasn't asking anyone to choose sides. I just wouldn't stay silent anymore. Then I sent it. 4 months passed. 4 months without a word from Richard. 4 months of silence from Emily. 4 months of quiet rearrangement as people adjusted based on what they now knew. Some apologized. Some vanished. I didn't miss those who left. What I missed was my home, not the rental, but the house I bought years ago. The one I worked on every weekend. The garden, the patio. The walls Emily and I painted when I still believed permanence was real. When I left that night, I hadn't packed properly. I just walked out. And then it hit me. The house was mine, bought before the marriage. My name, my money. Emily stayed because I hadn't reclaimed it, not because she had a right to it. I called my lawyer. The paperwork was clean, mortgage, title, all mine. She tried to delay, claimed emotional attachment, asked for half. There was nothing to claim. I gave her 30 days. She left quietly. The divorce took 7 months. Strangely, it was the calmest part of all this. When I sat in my driveway holding the finalized papers, stamped, sealed, official, I just stared. 12 pages undoing 3 years of lies. I walked back into the house. It felt eerie, like a place unaware it had been abandoned. Her scent lingered faintly. The emptiness felt right. I repainted, changed furniture, made it mine again. Richard and Emily faded out of my life completely. Sarah later told me they'd broken up. Apparently, she didn't like how he treated her once they were official. Funny how the guilt he never showed me eventually found her. And me, I was still standing. That was enough. Thank you for being part of our community. Your likes, comments, and shares help us bring more unbelievable Reddit family stories every day. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a shocking story.